The house at the end of Birchwood Lane was supposed to be Ethan Hale's clean slate, white siding, trimmed hedges, and a yard he could finally call his own. After the divorce, order was the only thing that calmed him. Grass cut in perfect lines, the mail stacked in symmetrical piles, silence filling the gaps where shouting once lived. He liked to watch the world through the kitchen window, where everything obeyed him, every blade, every shadow, every inch. Suburbia had a rhythm. Morning joggers, afternoon sprinklers, evening gossip murmured over fences. Ethan studied it like a new species. Neighbors waved too often. Their smiles looked rehearsed, as if happiness were mandatory here. He didn't mind, as long as they stayed on their side. Then came Karen Dempsey, HOA president, self-appointed warden of perfection. The first time he saw her, she was gliding across his lawn, clipboard in hand, eyes squinting as though measuring his existence. Her flats crushed the soft soil he'd just seeded. He stepped outside, voice even but tight. "Can I help you with something?" She turned, unbothered. "Just inspecting the common border. We all share this space, Ethan. Don't make it awkward." He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Then maybe start by respecting where mine begins." Karen's lips twitched, halfway between amusement and warning. She jotted something down, the pen's click sharp as a threat, and walked off toward the street, still on his grass. Ethan stood there long after she left, the hum of sprinklers filling the silence. Water misted over his shoes, catching in the evening light like tiny sparks. Karen's shadow had sliced across that same patch of green only moments ago, and somehow it lingered, an invisible scar on the perfect symmetry he'd built. His hand tightened around the garden shears. He told himself it was nothing. Just a neighbor. Just a line crossed. But deep down, Ethan felt it, that small, electric flicker of anger. The kind that doesn't fade. The kind that waits. The first notice came folded neatly in his mailbox. Violation, unapproved mailbox design. Ethan stared at it for a long time, the neat print blurring beneath his fingers. He hadn't changed the mailbox. It was there when he moved in. But there, at the bottom of the paper, was her signature. Karen Dempsey, HOA president. He laughed under his breath, but it wasn't amusement. It was disbelief. 2 days later came another, improper lawn edging. A week after that, unauthorized garden fixture. Each letter was stamped in the same officious tone, as though the very shape of his existence offended the order she ruled over. He started watching. Every afternoon, he'd sit by the living room window, eyes fixed on the street. He told himself he was just observing, but really, he was waiting. Waiting for her. At night, he replayed memories of his ex-wife, the way she'd accuse him of needing everything perfect. Her voice haunted the edges of his thoughts. "You can't control people like you control your yard, Ethan." Maybe not, he thought. But he could control what happened on his property. By the third warning, Ethan installed new cameras, one above the porch, another near the fence. He checked the feed obsessively. The footage was his reassurance, proof that he wasn't imagining it. Until one night, the reassurance vanished. He woke to the faint crunch of footsteps outside. The sprinklers were off. The street was quiet. He grabbed his phone, opened the live feed, black screen. The files were gone. Every recording from that week erased. The next morning, he approached his neighbor, Brian, trimming hedges in silence. "You ever feel like she's watching you?" Ethan asked, voice low. Brian's shears paused mid-cut. He glanced toward Karen's house, then back. "Karen watches everyone, man. Just don't push back." That night, Ethan sat in the dark, blinds half drawn, eyes flicking between the yard and the flickering monitor. Crumpled HOA letters cluttered his kitchen counter like trophies from a war he hadn't agreed to fight. Outside, under the glow of a porch light, something moved, a faint silhouette crossing his lawn. For one breath, he thought it was Karen again. But when he blinked, it was gone. Only the grass swayed, and the feeling that something was coming stayed. The fourth notice was the one that broke him. Final infraction. Continued non-compliance. Karen's handwriting looped across the bottom in ink so neat it felt mocking. Ethan crumpled the paper, dropped it on the counter beside the others, and stared out the window at his lawn, his sanctuary, his line in the sand. She wanted control. Fine. She could have a taste of it. That night, the neighborhood was still. A perfect stage for quiet revenge. Ethan worked under the porch light, tools laid out like surgical instruments, screwdriver, duct tape, bits of wire, shards of broken glass wrapped in rags. He told himself it wasn't violence. It was protection. His property. His rules. He started with motion-triggered sprinklers, harmless, almost funny. But then his hands didn't stop. The next layer came easy, a thin tripwire, nearly invisible under the grass, and shallow pits filled with glass glittering faintly under moonlight. As he buried the pieces, his pulse steadied. For the first time in months, he felt calm, methodical, powerful. By day, he played the part of a quiet neighbor again. Waved to mailmen, trimmed hedges, kept his head down. But as night fell, his thoughts turned sharp, electric. The line between justice and obsession blurred until it disappeared completely. While tightening a wire near the fence, he whispered under his breath, voice low and certain, "Let's see you cross now, Karen." The words lingered in the cool air, swallowed by the hum of cicadas. Then, like a ghost, his ex-wife's voice rose in memory. "You always go too far, Ethan. You don't know when to stop." He froze, eyes tracing the wires that webbed across the grass. Maybe she was right. Maybe he didn't. But then he looked toward Karen's house, porch light glowing like an eye, and felt that same flicker of defiance spark again. Later, he sat inside, watching the dark camera feed. His own reflection blinked back, cold, unblinking, almost unrecognizable. The yard looked peaceful under the moon, dew glistening over hidden danger. For the first time in weeks, Ethan slept soundly. Outside, the night waited, quiet and patient, for someone to take the first step. The sirens came with the sunrise, slicing through the quiet like an accusation. Ethan woke to flashing red and blue bleeding through his curtains. For a moment, he thought he was still dreaming. Then the shouting outside made it real. He stepped onto the porch barefoot, morning air cool against his skin. Across the yard, officers knelt beside a motionless shape. Karen's floral blouse stood out against the grass, torn, bloodied, wrong. The sprinklers had gone off just before dawn, leaving the lawn slick and shining. She must have triggered the wire, fallen forward, straight into the glass beneath. Neighbors gathered in hushed clusters, robes pulled tight, eyes darting between Karen and him. Someone whispered his name. Someone else muttered, "He warned her." Ethan stared blankly as an officer approached. "Mr. Hale, did you set this up?" He blinked once, steady. "No. But I warned her not to cross." The officer's gaze lingered, searching for guilt in the stillness of his face. Police tape fluttered between them, marking the lawn like a scar. Inside, Ethan sat at the kitchen table, watching through the window as paramedics lifted Karen's body onto a stretcher. His coffee went cold in his hands. Guilt pulsed faintly somewhere beneath the calm, but it felt distant, like a sound underwater. Another part of him, the darker part, whispered that she'd finally learned the rule he'd been begging her to respect. On the counter, her clipboard lay where an officer had set it aside. The word violation glared up through the smear of her blood. He turned to his monitor. The camera feed had captured everything, every step, every fall, every scream. Proof. Control. Justice. For a long moment, he watched it play back in silence. Then he dragged the file to the trash and hit delete. Outside, the sun climbed higher, painting the lawn golden and red. Ethan stood by the window, expression unreadable, almost serene. Across the street, neighbors whispered about the HOA's emergency meeting. They said Karen had been preparing a motion to remove Ethan from the community for unstable behavior. Now, she never would.